actually very interesting to see a lot of communication there as a tool to improve people-centered justice. And indeed, I will talk about people-centered justice, and I will try to analyze it in a systematic way, based on data. How could we achieve this Sustainable Development Goal number 16? Being evidence-based, step by step. I will talk mainly on materials that you can also find in our recent trend report that is downloadable on our website. But before I start, let me zoom in a bit on the city of The Hague. I indeed grew up here, 2K down the road. I even spent a lot of Wednesday afternoons in this hotel. Think, what does a professor do on a Wednesday afternoon in a hotel? My daughter's got swimming lessons here. And you have heard by now that it's rather preventively necessary to take swimming lessons in this country. I also biked to school, always passing the Peace Palace. And that is what our city is famous for, these very big justice institutions. But I'm not that sure that the Peace Palace bring the peace the world needs, that the International Criminal Court or the Yugoslav Tribunal, where we brought Karadzic, Mladic, etc., has contributed much to peace. What we see is very adversarial processes here, costing up to 100 million per case. So my city is also an example of the problems justice has, reaching people, bringing peace. And I'm much more sure about your contribution, because you solve millions of problems each year together. And you are, in a way, also contributing already big time to Sustainable Development Goal 16. And it's interesting to see that the word peace comes back in your services. The English Legal Services Board figured out why people buy your insurance. And it's mainly because they want to have peace of mind. I found a supplier of your type of insurance that is called Zensurance. I don't know whether somebody from Zensurance is in this room, but it goes in the same direction, the Zorgloos Pakket from Arag. So you're very much in this goal already. And as my talk will show, much hope is on you that we can achieve Sustainable Development Goal 16. We all need a people-centered way to supply peace and justice. Many people are now researching the number of justice problems that are coming up in every country. The so-called legal needs surveys, we have done them in more than 20 countries ourselves, from Africa to Ukraine to the Netherlands and the US. And you see there the number of problems that need resolution. And it's also becoming more and more clear that there is huge benefits for citizens and practitioners and for the economy and for achieving sustainable development goals. Because every single goal that we looked at during the past presentation by Günther, it involves settlements, conflicts, different parties coming to different arrangements. So in a way, it's okay that Sustainable Development Goal 16 is in the end and needed to achieve, because without 16, we can't solve the conflicts that are needed to meet the other Sustainable Development Goals. If we zoom in on these findings from legal needs surveys, you see in every country that most conflicts are about these issues. You will recognize them from your portfolio. And you will also see how they are linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. And in our analysis, it's always about being dependent on somebody else, on your local government to supply social services, on your ex-partner to solve your family problems, on your employer. And this dependency requires an intervention by third parties. That is what peace and justice is mostly about. And in a way, what you are selling is inspired by Sustainable Development Goal 16. You're selling, in a way, peace insurance. What your customers want is restoration, normalization of their relationships with fair outcomes for everyone, whether it's child support, stopping as much as possible the noise from your neighbors, or a reasonable relationship with somebody who has injured you personally, and a way to go forward with your life with sufficient money. That's what your insurance is about. You ensure that there's no unnecessary escalation in that relationship, and that people can get peace of mind and peace in their relationships. A few slides about how difficult this now is. We know that small businesses, individuals need more effective and more responsive justice services. It's a known fact in every country. It's clear from all the surveys that the systems are not helping these people sufficiently. But it's also the lawyers, the government agents, the people in the system suffering from this. The law is working pretty well for the big city law firms. I started my career as a partner in a big law firm, and it's working there. But everybody who is working for individuals, whether it's a lawyer, a social worker, a judge, or a prosecutor, they all suffer from not being sufficiently effective, being stuck in ever more complicated procedures with ever more procedural options and avenues. And you need more effective justice systems as well, because in the end, what you ensure is the costs of ineffectiveness, and what you want to ensure is the costs of an effective and sustainable solution for your clients. There's reason to look at this slide. Why is every sustainable development goal in a way progressing? A lot of people came out of poverty in the past 20 years. Why are we not improving in our field? This is a slide from the Rule of Law Index 2022 that was launched on Wednesday by the World Justice Project. They're the main provider of these data. And please keep in mind, they basically ask lawyers for their opinions on how the law is developing. And lawyers might be a little bit optimistic about their own stuff. If you ask citizens and look at these data, it might be even more difficult. And you might think, this rule of law, of course, it's declining. We have the Orbáns and the Putins and the Bolsonaros, and it's all about authoritarianism. If we zoom in on civil justice, which is more your business, we also see that over the past 7 years, on most indicators, most countries have deteriorated. So we are not on the right track with Sustainable Development Goal number 16. Everybody needs justice. Everybody benefits from better justice. Why is it not happening? We kind of assume that there will be people in the system that take this as a goal and work on it. And as an NGO working on this, funded by governments, working in the field of access to justice for 15 years, we also kind of assumed that there would be leaders that feel responsible for delivering on SDG 16. But let us zoom in on a number of possible actors in this field. We see you. You are dependent on how the enabling environment for your services look like. Whether you can be successful in the field of family justice or crime or neighbor justice depends on how the lawyers and the courts work and how the justice system is organized by the Ministry of Justice. We see many ambitious ministers of justice in many countries. And we also see that they are mostly held accountable for the flaws in the system every day. As some prisoner escapes and there's a big issue in Parliament. They can't have an overview of the system. Moderate politicians, we know how squeezed they are in current societies. What can they do? How many members do their parties have? How much R&D can they bring to their work? So work on this systematically. It's hard for the neutrals in this world. We see a lot of academics and people from law firms setting up legal tech issues. Ventures. They have a nephew who comes from IT, and they start delivering advice online. But do they really have a route to widespread implementation of innovations? Many of you work in this space of innovation and probably have had the same experience that it's difficult. Law firms, the model works for consulting on major cases. The model doesn't work for small law firms serving thousands of people. How is it possible that in the entire world there's no law firm specializing in neighbor justice or family justice and doing this on a really big scale? There's something missing here. Private foundations, I don't know whether you follow how George Soros and his Open Society are treated on Twitter. Might become better with Elon in charge, I don't know. But it's not good. Private foundations are staying out of democracy and rule of law now. So who can take the lead? We have looked at these options and looked at who can take the lead for many years now. We see how little is actually invested in improving the system. Even in your companies, I'm not sure whether you reach the 3% R&D that is across the board in general industries normal. And we certainly don't spend 10% on R&D as is done in the most innovative industries and probably in the field of climate change. So are we waiting for miracles, hoping that justice systems will recover by themselves, that the rule of law will come back in Hungary or whatever country you're zooming into? Or should we tackle this rigorously and systematically and work on it? There is a leadership vacancy, but it would be possible to set up a task force. There are sufficient leaders in the field, in the justice sector in your country to bring them together and start doing things, to make the case, to take ownership, look at how you can't solve all the justice problems at the same time. you need strategic thinking. We need this kind of leadership. And please compare the leadership in your companies with the leadership you see in courts. These judges that are promoted to managerial roles, the leadership you see in law firms, and maybe there's a place for your leadership in this field. In our report, we also explain the so-called mission approach. It's developed by Italian-English researcher Mariana Mazzucato, and it's tailored for big goals, for sustainable development goals. And she describes how you can tackle big issues in society by this mission approach, and we describe it in the report. And I will now quickly mention 5 strategies that are essential for a mission approach in the field of access to justice. And we calculated and estimated that a goal of solving 80% of conflicts between people, pressing conflicts of people and SMEs, and in local governance, that could be prevented or resolved through fair agreements or decisions. In the Netherlands, based on the most recent data, the current percentage is 32%. So it's doubling the resolution rate, the fair resolution rate. What would be needed for that? First, we should, as a task force in this field, we should, of course, make our case and look at the return on investment. We had the Ministry of Justice assign a research assignment to an economic research institute, and they calculated that improving access to justice in the way that is on the mission slide would generate 0.15% of GDP, and they calculated carefully how that would work. It's about increasing productivity. It's a big gain in quality of life, because we don't only look to GDP anymore. We look to a more broad idea of well-being. So the return on investment would really be very big. And if you would invest that money, where would you invest in? On working more with data. I've spoken to many of you earlier today and yesterday, and data is on your mind. And indeed, you have very valuable data. You have data on problems. I'm not sure whether you already collect data on the impact of these problems on the lives of your clients, but you can certainly also use data about how to achieve settlements. And that is one way to make progress. Monitor the right data. We shouldn't probably monitor how many people get access to a lawyer. We should probably monitor how many people got good solutions for their neighbor justice problem or their family justice problem. Monitoring is what the groups working on people-centered justice are prioritizing. Get our monitoring systems right. The second strategy is evidence-based working. It's as simple as that. If you want to increase the probability of resolution, you have to look at the best practices in your country. But there's also, I know that as a researcher, there's an enormous amount of research around about the effectiveness of interventions. So working evidence-based, our big example is the healthcare sector, is really something that would work and what would be in your interest. If we talk about evidence-based, it's not about knowing everything about law. If you look at how people actually solve conflicts and you dig into conflict resolution research and negotiation research, these are the kind of steps that people take. And getting better at all these steps, you spoke about communication in your comments, and that is obviously very important. That is what will make the difference. That is what will make your people more effective. Better organizational and financial models. Later today, there will be a workshop on game-changing organizational and financial models. And obviously, you have a big role to play in that field as well. And you're the specialist in financing access to justice journeys. And if you analyze how these journeys are now financed and how that could be improved, it's a bit strange to ask from people in big distress to pay up for a court case 2 years before they get a decision. It's a bit strange that big companies in many countries pay nominal court fees, which is not proportionate to what type of time they use from the courts. So there's a lot to improve here. It's basically also how you see your own, the future of your own business. When I was preparing this talk, I spoke to a few people I know from Dutch legal protection insurance companies, and they all see healthcare and accident protection as an example. If I with my car hit a tree, then you have organized how it will be repaired, what the cost of will be. You will be referring me to the right people. In healthcare, your colleagues play a big role to get the right interventions financed, the right interventions applied. It's a difficult role, but it's a very important role to play in the system. And you are playing it already, and we need it, that you play that role. What is also important, especially in our sector, is the regulatory environment. There's more to that than whether people have free choice of a lawyer. We need to rethink how the sector is regulated. And one of the roles you could play is to really ensure that good R&D is happening in this field. It's explained in the report, and I think that your sector has a role to play here. In the end, it's also making people-centered justice more of a movement. Currently, very serious people like me, not so much innovation, people in this city working on peace and justice, in small NGOs struggling for survival. We need to bring people-centered justice more into in a movement space. There's so much to gain, and we have to contribute more to peace, prosperity, and inclusiveness. In sum, my appeal to you, we all need peaceful, just resolution. Legal protection insurance is restoring peace in people's minds and in their relationships. This problem will not solve by itself. Miracles will not happen. And you can take the lead by requiring evidence-based, people-centered interventions from courts and legal services, and by investing in R&D so that the system gets better, the regulatory environment gets improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurits Barendrecht. Maurits, thank you so much, Maurits. All right, Maurits, I'm going to grab you for one quick question, then we're going to go to a coffee break. Maurits, we had a question that came through. Where do you see the biggest or the real barriers for access to law for everyone? Is it mindsets or legislation?
I think if we really could translate the right mindset of people-centered justice in
People-centered
legislation,
justice.
because you need a framework. I think that combination.
I think that's perfectly said. Maurits, thank you so much. Maurits is hanging around.